We very much appreciate you joining us and listening to what we have to say to give an update and new information about the Solvay facility. We are also going to be talking about PFAS compounds in Gloucester County, and we're going to hear from people who live here. So we're thrilled to have everyone. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and start the slides. And because we are dealing with a historic situation with legacy pollutants as well as new pollutants, it's a little complicated. So bear with us as we go through. So first of all, what are PFAS? I think a lot of people may know what they are, but just to make it really clear, PFAS stand for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and they're a group of synthetic chemicals. They include the most commonly ones that we hear about, which is PFOA and PFOS. Those were released by manufacturing and firefighting foam at military facilities and firefighting schools, airports, and also PFNA. PFNA is not as prevalent as as PFOA and PFOS in other places in the country, but because we have Solvay in our Gloucester County region here, we do have high levels of PFNA that have had to be addressed by regulation and treatment. So PFNA is in New Jersey's environment across the state as well. And it has moved there through various environmental media, but it is the heaviest in Gloucester County. PFNA moves by water, groundwater, surface water, what they call biosolids, which is actually sludge from wastewater treatment plants that are applied onto agricultural fields and parks. And it's also in various products. But particularly here in Gloucester County, it has entered the environment through groundwater and surface water. And now we think also by air, particularly for another chemical related to Solvay that we'll be discussing in a minute. So Solvay has released this for decades, at least since 1985. The original Penwalt that operated it in the middle 1980s, they released it into the environment. But Solvay and their various precursor names for their company has for decades released PFNA into the environment. PFAS generally are very widely distributed across the entire world. I mean, they've even found it in polar bears. It's in the blood of hundreds of millions of people. And as I said, it's spread through various environmental media. They call them forever chemicals, and that's because they do not biodegrade on their own. They do not break down, and they bioaccumulate, or they build up. They build up in the environment, and they also build up in the human body. So how do they actually threaten your health? Well, they build up in the human body, they concentrate in the blood, they go to your liver, they go to your kidney, and that's where you have problems. And we'll talk about that in a second. Scientists estimate the levels in a person's blood magnifies to about 105 times to the amount that was in their water. So as you drink it, even tiny amounts can concentrate to extremely dangerous levels in your blood, higher than the level known to have adverse health effects. And that increased the risk of you developing a disease that is linked or correlated to these toxic chemicals. That's one of the problems. They're so toxic and so dangerous. So what are the health threats? Well, there's been quite a bit of research, particularly into these three particular ones that we're talking about so far tonight. And PFAS are correlated with diseases, and they look at that by examining the links between human exposure and the incidence of disease. And many scientific studies have been done, hundreds upon hundreds, on the effect of PFAS in animals, which is the way that you do a risk assessment in order to then extrapolate and figure out what the impact is on humans. And then there's also some, and actually quite a bit for PFOA, epidemiological information because of people being exposed to PFOA, particularly where it was first discovered in West Virginia and Ohio as a result of the DuPont company's release of PFOA. So they know through studies, and there's a link here to the C8 Science panel, the C8 studies that were done of the people who for decades were exposed to PFOA have higher incidences of kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, pregnancy-induced hypertension or preeclampsia, and ulcerative colitis. Studies also show that through scientific analyses that have been done, that low infant birth weight, immune system impacts, and developmental impacts occur, making particularly children vulnerable, and those with compromised immune systems. And it also, through recent studies, they found out that it decreases the body's ability to respond to vaccines. Very dangerous in the time of COVID-19. PFNA specifically is linked to high cholesterol or vaccine response as well. Also metabolic effects, includes things like diabetes, effects on a person's immune system and thyroid and reproductive system. It affects liver enzymes and birth outcomes. And there's links, and there will be links at the end that we're going to be showing, and we're also going to put them into the follow-up email that we send. So these links give you more information so you can read for yourself. So we know because of what you might call a fingerprint, that Solvay has been the source of PFNA released into the environment. And we know that, that they used PFNA in a patented product that was used for plastics and coatings. And these were manufactured at Solvay, and they were released since then. And it was actually a problem for a long time before the public found out about it. There was an analysis that was done by the state of New Jersey in the 2000s on a current study. And then it was followed up with another current study that was ready to be released in 2010 when the agency that does the drinking water analyses and makes recommendations for safe drinking water standards for New Jersey, the New Jersey Drinking Water Quality Institute, was shut down in 2010 by the Christie administration. And as a result, that final occurrence report and recommendations that that agency, that institute, was about to recommend in terms of a safe drinking water standard, or what they call a maximum contaminant level for PFOA, was never released. And finally, through a right to know request that they call them OPRAs, or Open Public Records Act requests, that we many times submitted after 2010 here at Delaware Riverkeeper Network to New Jersey DEP, we finally got the information in 2013, and our hair stood on end. We could not believe the widespread problem of PFAS in New Jersey that this second occurrence study confirmed. And we were really shocked by the extremely high level for one PFAS compound in New Jersey, the highest in all of the state, and that was PFNA, and it was in the Paulsboro water well source. And when we saw that, we immediately put it out into the press. We sent a letter to DEP. We got in touch with the municipalities. And I'm not going to go through all of it. Many of you may have lived through that. It was a time when bottled water had to be given out. 5 municipalities had to shut down their wells. It was a real emergency. And as a result of that, the Drinking Water Quality Institute was reconvened. And they met in 2014, and there was a charge from New Jersey DEP that they immediately look at PFNA, because when New Jersey DEP did their research, they found that it was the highest level recorded at Paulsboro than anywhere else in the world. So they were alarmed as well. And they charged the Drinking Water Quality Institute with developing a maximum contaminant level for PFNA first, and then to also address PFOA and PFOS, the other 2 most prevalent PFAS compounds that they found in these occurrence studies. So that was done, and Uh, Again, to make a long story short, in 2018, uh, uh, the maximum contaminant level or the mandatory drinking water standard that everybody has to, all water suppliers have to actually adhere to was issued in 2018 after a long rulemaking process and a public process, both at the Institute and at the state level. And then that was followed in 2020 after a lot of pushing by a lot of people. But thank God New Jersey DEP was on board with it. And PFOA, MCL was adopted in 2020, and so was PFOS. I have to say that our New Jersey DEP scientists and those who serve on the Drinking Water Quality Institute were cutting edge on this, because New Jersey ended up being the first state to adopt any standard for any PFAS compound. And that's lucky for us because it provided protection long before others, especially since the federal government is doing nothing. They have sat on their hands for years on this. We can answer more about this in the Q&A if you're interested. But some of the 56,000 people that were affected originally by the 2014 discovery of this problem came out. Here's at the Paulsboro High School, came out and spoke up. And because people spoke up and the municipalities spoke up and actually went to bat and fought for attention from the state and from Solvay, action occurred. If this had not happened, if there had not been a big uproar and people, stepping forward, I don't think anything would have changed, or it would have taken a lot longer. It already took long enough. So, this is one of the reasons we're having this webinar tonight, so we can make sure that people know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, you're not going to be able to say anything about it. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, and none of us on this webinar are scientists or experts, but what we're doing is sharing what we do know in order for you to find out, and then you can join in taking action to make sure that the problems that still exist are going to be addressed. So, outside of the burning issue of, what is in the water and what does it mean, many people are very concerned. And I think probably the thing that pops into most people's minds is, what has this done to my health? How has it affected my family's health? And people want to know an answer to this question. And we're going to talk about it a little bit at the end, but basically there is a blood study that will be beginning this summer. It's being conducted by the Yoshi Institute, the public health arm of Rutgers. And there was already been one done, but it was limited. And it was done a few years ago. This is the second one that's being funded by the federal government, ATSDR, and it'll be starting up. People in Paulsboro and some people outside of Paulsboro and West Deptford, if you meet the parameters that all these subjects that are going to be volunteering their blood have to meet, such as drinking water during a certain period of time and living there in a certain period of time, then you would be able to have your blood tested. And we're going to have a link at the end to tell you how to get in touch to be included, see if you could be included in that study. So as far as our situation today, because there have been standards adopted to remove these three pollutants, and the final implementation of that actually took place just in January because of the way they phased it in. There has been already operating a lot of treatment systems. I mean, Paulsboro's, for instance, went in years ago because they sent a notice of intent to sue to Solvay in order to have the treatment system put on their well. They had no water at all because they only had one well. And those kinds of actions got treatment installed pretty early on. Some water companies like New Jersey American voluntarily put it on down at DuPont, for instance, because they also have PFOA pollution in that area. So some treatment systems have been on for years and some are just going now. But it is regulation and mandatory that these pollutants be removed down to these certain levels of 13 parts per trillion for PFNA, 14 parts per trillion for PFOA, and 14 parts per trillion for PFOS. So now we come up to today. And today we're facing another problem. And that is because of the toxicity of what they call long carbon chain PFAS compounds. That is, they have long number of carbons in a chain in the formula that they use. They're very, very durable. As we said earlier, they don't break down. They're very strong. Those bonds are very strong. And that's one of the reasons they build up in your blood and don't break down in the environment. And because of that, even though Solvay, DuPont, 3M, Dow DuPont, the agencies, I mean, the companies that the New Jersey has instructed to give directives to in order to find out how much they've used at those sites, how they've disposed of it. Those companies, even though they've stopped using those compounds, they're still in the environment and still being discharged because they don't go away. So, there's cleanups going on under various regulatory structures at these various polluted sites. But Solvay has been um, resistant to complying with the directive that was issued by New Jersey DEP. And as a result of that, Solvay was sued in November of 2020 by New Jersey. And New Jersey is trying to get them to give the information that they've been attempting to get. One of the problems that they're facing is that Solvay has been claiming that the replacement compounds are covered as proprietary information, and basically they're keeping secret how to test for these compounds and what they're actually made up of. They actually hid toxicity studies for years from EPA when they were going through the process of getting an approval from EPA to use the replacement compound that they were required to replace PFNA with. And all of the replacement compounds that were required because PFAS were found to be by the federal government so toxic, so they were being phased out. All of them had to go through what now we can see is a very cursory review by EPA because there's a lot of loopholes in that law. But those replacement compounds were of course supposed to be safer and not as toxic as the PFAS compound that they were replacing. But a terrible irony has occurred in the Gloucester County environment as a result of Solvay's replacement, and that's that the replacement compounds that Solvay is using instead of PFNA have turned out to be as toxic or maybe more toxic, according to New Jersey DEP scientists, than PFNA. And this is a terrible piece of news because here we're supposed to be taking care of a toxic pollutant in our environment that is correlated to serious disease, and instead it's been replaced with a compound that might be just as dangerous and is probably, and according to science, more dangerous. And there's a lot of questions surrounding this. We will try to address it in Q&A, but so I don't take too much more time on this, I do want to say that there were two science articles. One of them was in Science Magazine. That's where this is from here. Another one was in another peer-reviewed journal. And because of Environmental Protection Agency and DEP scientists here in New Jersey, there was a lot of forensic work done to discover these replacement compounds in the water. And they were discovered in surface water, in soil, and in groundwater. And they were also found in some water wells where sporadic testing has been done. So we do know that it's not only toxic, but it's in the environment. And it's what they have found through the study that was done and that these two reports were written on, and I understand more reports are going to be coming out based on the extensive analysis that they did for about 3 years. In these reports, we're learning that it's in higher concentrations the closer you are to Solvay, but as you move away, it does move into the environment, and these replacement compounds have been found strewn across New Jersey and found as far away as the farthest northeastern corner of New Jersey. They even did 2 random samples, one in New Hampshire and one, I think it was Georgia. And the one in the south did not find this replacement compound, but the one in New Hampshire did. And it came from Solvay, and it has what the scientists call a PFAS Solvay fingerprint on it. So we know it's from them. So that means this particular compound is being spread uh, by air, perhaps even more than the original PFAS were. That's bad news because it means it can go far. Again, though, Gloucester County, and particularly the communities right around Gloucester County, is ground zero for this. That's why we're having this focus on tonight on Gloucester County. So I want to get to our speakers tonight, but I do want to say that we have a lot of information to share, and we're not going to be able to do it justice on an hour-long webinar. But our page, which is the first link on Delaware Riverkeeper Network's page, a web page, that's the link to it, has the whole history dating back to when Delaware Riverkeeper Network did door-to-door sampling of tap water in Deepwater, New Jersey, and discovered PFOA and other PFAS compounds. So we actually were the first ones to discover it in New Jersey, and we sent that information to, of course, to the residents whose homes we sampled it at, and to New Jersey DEP. And that is part of the history of PFAS in New Jersey. We start with that, and that whole story is told throughout the year. So if you're interested, you can go there, and there's a lot of links and a lot of reference documents that fill in the backstory. We have various other documents linked here. One is a letter that myself and also other organizations in New Jersey who are concerned about this, New Jersey Sierra Club, Environment New Jersey, and Clean Water Action, and Delaware Riverkeeper Network sent a letter to New Jersey DEP after we read that science article, which came out in July of last year about the replacements. We sent a second letter when the second scientific article came out in the fall, and we haven't gotten a written response yet. We did get a phone call. We're hoping to be able to meet with DEP in order to sort out these problems and what they're actually going to be able to do. How are they going to get the information they need out of Solvay? Maybe it'll be through the lawsuit. But we need that information in order to do the sampling to find out where it is, how much of it is there, and then to start the investigations into how it actually affects the human body. And do people have this in their blood as well? That is not going to be included in this next link, which is the PFAS health study that's being done by Rutgers. They are centering that in Paulsboro. They're getting an office there, and they're going to be opening up a blood draw site. And through that study, they're looking at PFNA and other PFAS compounds. They won't be looking at the replacement compounds. There's no method for sampling for it yet. That's the science that needs to be done that Solvay is holding back from even those who need it, such as scientists. Also, in New Jersey, they have a fact sheet about PFAS on the DEP website. They also discuss the regulations and everything that's been adopted. That's what these next few links are all about. And also the New Jersey Drinking Water Quality Institute. If you want to get into the details about how they did the risk assessment that produced the maximum contaminant levels, go there. You'll find out. And it's for PFNA, PFOA, and PFOS. The Department of Health has an excellent fact sheet on this. It's better than most of the others that other states or the federal government has done. There is a lot of information on the federal government sites, the ATSDR sites, and we can talk more about that or do follow up. We're hoping perhaps to have another webinar as well. And then the lawsuit where New Jersey sued Solvay is a fountain of information. If you want to really get into it, that's the link to it, and go to town. Also, we do want to point out that people take in these PFAS compounds mostly through their drinking water, but there are other sources. And the second largest source of exposure to PFAS compounds is through the consumption of fish. And New Jersey is one of the few states that's done sampling of fish, and they have found PFAS compounds in the fish. and in the fish around Gloucester County, in Delaware River, actually throughout New Jersey. But you can read all the details on that at that link. And there's also a study of the occurrence in soil, sediment, and fish that's connected to this fish advisory. And you can get that link when you go on that site. Also, you can always get in touch with me. So as we move now into the next part of our presentation, I'd like to introduce to you some of the people who are experiencing the problems that we all are talking about here tonight. And those folks, as I said in the beginning, are Marilyn Quinn, Jim Stewart, and Gina Carola. But we're going to start and just hear some thoughts from each of them. And we're going to start with Marilyn Quinn. And Marilyn is from West Deptford. She serves on her environmental commission. And she's going to tell you what her concerns are. So Marilyn, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, yes. My name is Marilyn Quinn, and I'm living with a clear view of Solvay specialty polymers from my sunroom window in the back of my home in West Deptford, New Jersey. These per and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals, the PFAS or PFAS, have been pouring into your environment and mine for decades. They are also in many products you and I have been using. And now the replacement chemical, the so-called, which I can't really say, CLIPPICA, which is a very long acronym, which has only recently been revealed through legal action, but not willingly, by Solvay, is known to be just as toxic, if not more toxic. Their own company studies had been withheld once again. Solvay has sued companies that develop tests for these chemicals. I read recently of one. Now they are promising to end using these latest chemicals in June. They say they are investing in new technologies completely unlike the forever chemical hazards that have enriched them, but can we trust them? When I moved here back in 2004, I did not know what Solvay's business was. And I did not know about the dangers of the chemicals it was discharging into water. And we now know they are discharging this stuff into the air, the soil. It goes into the sediment and the fish. And as a retired university librarian, I research and delve into issues that concern me. This issue has been the subject of academic journals, local, national, and international reports, and many nonprofit and scientific organizations. I have a huge folder. I have been happy that our current township government has been addressing the contamination of our drinking water sources as best as they can. There is testing of our drinking water, which is now required, and residents get a full report every year. The township has promised to keep abreast of the science behind the testing and the purification of our water, but they can only go as far as what is known about these chemicals, and they depend on the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, which have struggled to find out the nature of the chemicals. Much information was hidden by political appointees at the EPA over the last 4 years, which is hard to believe. I just find it appalling. These toxins are not limited to my township. They are in all of your townships, flowing in the streams and rivers into wells and blowing well beyond the factories. Solvay is not the only perpetrator, but it is a big one. Other companies have been doing the same with the same kind of chemicals: Chemours, DuPont, Arkema, 3M, and Honeywell. The new Biden administration is actively working on the issue. There was actually in 2019, somebody passed something called the PFAS Action Plan, but it was stripped in Congress and because in spite of a bipartisan support, because of the industrial lobbyists and the political donations that go on. Over the last decade, these lobbyists and political donations have influenced legislation and have weakened and prevented regulations and let companies such as Solvay produce and discharge these chemicals. But the science is now becoming more available. which will encourage legal action for the damage that has been done. I want the public to know what companies like Solvay have done. These dangerous chemicals stay in the environment. They do not go away, and Solvay has known this. They do not go away. They have reimbursed my township for some of the water remediation, but they have affected people all over and should be liable, not just for the damages done to the bodies of people who drink the water, but those who use the end products, such as firefighting foam, takeout containers for your fast food, rain-resistant clothing, not to mention liable for testing and helping to return our soil and our water and rivers, back to some kind of normalcy. This is where we get our vegetables, our fruits, our fish, and so much more. I asked Solvay to test my garden soil. I'm an avid gardener. As I said, I only live actually less than half a mile from this plant. I asked Solvay to test the soil. They said they could not test it, which I believe is false. They owe all of us and should pay for the costs of testing and remediation. The health effects are definitely widespread and disturbing. I follow reporting in American and in international news and science resources. I mean, when you read in Britain and Germany and all over about West Deptford and Solvay, you know this is serious here. So I ask, did my brother-in-law's kidney cancer come from all this? Is my sudden spike in cholesterol a result? I never had this before. Will it affect my immune response to vaccines? All of these ailments and many more have been associated with such chemicals in studies by independent scientists. Can we ever hope that our government can assure us that industry is not poisoning our future and that such injury is criminal? How much money will it take to help heal the injury to our health and to the natural world? How much of your money, my money, and your children's money will our communities demand action? That's what I want to find out. So
Thank you,
obviously I'm
Marilyn.
quite angry.
Thank you, Marilyn. If anyone has questions for Marilyn, please type them into the Q&A. If you joined a little late after our beginning, put any question that you have into the Q&A box so we can see it, and we'll answer it as best we can. And then after our Q&A session, we will be sending a link to this recording out to everybody. And if there are any other questions that we missed or that were accidentally put into the chat, for instance, we'll try to answer those as well. And if you joined late before I said so, please introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're from. We'd like to know where people are from who joined us. So our second speaker here tonight is our panelist, Jim Stewart. And James Stewart is from National Park, and he's going to make some remarks. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. For a lot of you may not know where National Park is. It's only a 1 square mile town surrounded by West Deptford, right on the Delaware River. We're like 2 miles north of the Solvay plant. So we're in the red zone. I've lived here for over 30 years. Before retiring as an architect, my primary job was writing construction specifications. Because of that, I was familiar with Solvay. They and their predecessor companies were manufacturers of a resin for architectural coatings, which are used to finish aluminum curtain wall and other building components. Although the product was safe after application, its manufacture has possibly resulted in contamination of soil and subsurface water in the surrounding area, according to the New Jersey DEP. I have a collection of National Park water quality reports that are issued quarterly. Each one indicates that our water has consistently violated the state's drinking water standard for PFNA, which is 13 parts per trillion. I commend our mayor and council for staying on top of this problem and keeping the residents informed of the progress to get New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection to approve an application to acquire the needed filtration system to protect our water from this contaminant. I am concerned, however, about how long it took the NJDEP approval. Approval was taken over 6 months, and financing through the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank is yet to be finalized. I am also concerned that residents who have a severely compromised immune system or who are pregnant, have an infant, or are elderly are at an increased risk and are being asked to seek advice from their healthcare providers about drinking this water. They are also being told there is a household carbon filter that could be purchased. The recommended carbon filters with National Science Foundation certification primarily filter PFOA and PFOS chemicals. To better filter PFNA chemicals, a carbon filter should be combined with a reverse osmosis filter. However, they are very expensive. Unfortunately, there apparently are no funds available to cover these costs. I've had health problems of the types listed as being a result of long-term exposure to these chemicals. Unfortunately, it remains very difficult to prove a causation. I hope that this contamination can be corrected, and soon I hope that those found responsible for this contamination be held responsible for all the costs associated with its remediation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I greatly appreciate it. So our last speaker tonight is Gina Carola. And Gina is a 38-year resident of West Deptford. She is going to be making comments here tonight. And thank you, Gina, for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Like Tracy said, I lived in West Deptford for 38 years. Lived in National Park prior to that. And I'm glad to hear Marilyn say that West Deptford's town council is now addressing this issue, because when this whole issue of the PFOAs came to light, maybe, what was it, Tracy, 10 years ago or so, I started attending the environmental commission meetings when I was living there. And at that point, the mayor and council was sweeping it under the rug. They did not want people to know about it. Don't know why, but that's what they did. And but people found out, so they had to address it. I can't say that I've suffered any health problems, but I was kind of hoping to move back to West Deptford soon. I just had a realtor in to look up my place, but it's probably going to depend on what comes out of these new chemicals. I'm not sure I want to live there if I'm going to have to worry about my drinking water being polluted. So currently I have been for many years, the New Jersey Sierra Club's liaison to the Delaware. I'm the Delaware River issue coordinator, so I've worked with Tracy on a lot of different things. So I'm very interested in this issue, and I want to help keep people informed.
Thank you, Gina. Appreciate your comments. So all three of our panelists here, Marilyn, Jim, and Gina, all mentioned the replacement compounds and an emerging situation, which I mentioned earlier as well, and that is these replacement compounds. Now, it has just been announced within the last week by Solvay, something that they had been saying to people off and on, that they were going to be doing away with the replacement compounds, the perfluoro polyether carboxylates, and replacing those with other non-perfluorinated compounds. So they made this announcement publicly last week, and they say they're going to be using Hylar and what's called Technoflow instead. Now, it's a little hard for those of us who have been dealing with this, and especially those who've been living with it in the Gloucester County region, to stand up and give a giant round of applause to Solvay. of course, it's absolutely essential that they stop using these replacement compounds. For gosh sakes, they found to be more toxic than the PFNA that they were supposed to safely replace. So that is great. Of course, they have to do that. And I think Marilyn, it was that said, this amounts to something like a crime, that if they were to go on knowing that they have problems with the chemicals that they're using. But it's because that they have been so secretive about these replacement compounds, we have to ask the questions. Are they going to disclose exactly what are the toxic properties of these new chemicals? Do they have toxic properties? How do they affect the human body? Do they affect wildlife? Are they moved through the air and the water? Are they easily transported? How are they going to manufacture them? How much of the product is actually going to go into the plastics, the coatings that they create? And how much is going to go into the environment? Are they going to be safe? That's the big question. Or are they also going to have health effects? It's a little hard for people to trust them and believe that these are safe when they found out that they've been tricked, essentially, by the replacement compounds. So yes, they need to replace the toxic replacements, just like they needed to replace PFNA. We can't tolerate having toxic compounds in our drinking water. They don't belong there and they must be removed. And the sources of that contamination must be cleaned up. But whether or not these replacements for the replacements are going to be good for the community and our human health and our wildlife and environment remains to be seen. We want to know, is Solvay going to completely disclose right now everything before they start using these new products? And if they have used these products in the past, then give us right now the studies that have been done to prove that they're safe. And so mainly wanted to let everyone know that not only do we have the replacements, but now we have replacements for the replacements. It's gotten more complicated, but the same issue remains. We don't want toxic materials in our drinking water, in our soil, in the vegetables that we grow in our backyards, and the fish that we take from the streams around here. We don't want it in our air. We don't want it in the consumer products where people also get exposed to it, but we want Solvay to stop releasing it and to clean up the source of the pollution so they are no longer a liability for the people of New Jersey, particularly the people of this area of New Jersey. Okay, so let's move on to some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to look at the question box here. So Solvay's primary product, well, Jim mentioned, because he worked in architecture, he knows that they made coatings, but basically their product was used like a very durable coating. They are found in plastics, and over the years their trademarked product has been used in a lot of different applications. So it's mainly plastic coatings. Anybody have anything to add to that amongst our panelists? Jim?
Yes. As many of you might know, DuPont was the organization that created this product originally quite a few decades ago. They had a patent on it for a number of years. When that patent ended, a lot of other competitors started manufacturing that same product. It's a resin that's part of a coating system. 70% of the product is resin, and the other part is the coloring, and then the other part is a solvent to dry the product. It's coated on the metals. It could be metal framing, could be metal roof. The key elements of that is that it was very durable. It was a great product when it came out because of its durability, its ability to move without cracking, because metal moves quite a bit, and color retention. So it was specified in a lot of products for architectural work.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay, the next question was from Jean, and what do you recommend the public do? Sorry, the Q&A just moved a little bit. So there's going to be some opportunities for the public to engage on this issue in the near future. And one of them is the cleanup plan at Solvay. Under the regulations for cleanup of polluted sites in New Jersey, there is a requirement for a cleanup plan to be approved. That plan has been going through various drafts and iterations for years. Delaware Riverkeeper Network back in, I think it was 2014, 15, commented on the first iteration of that work plan through an expert that we engaged, a hydrogeologist. And but that has not been settled, and it's one of the reasons that probably ended up in litigation because of the stubbornness of Solvay to agree to what New Jersey DEP said was necessary in order to truly address the contamination at the site and off-site. So that cleanup plan is going to be finalized soon. And so they're required under the regulations in New Jersey to have public meetings, at least one, there may be more. And we need people to come out to that. We need people to come out and ask the hard questions, to say what they think. You know, one of the things that sometimes people feel, you know, it's difficult to go and talk about something that I'm not an expert. You don't need to be an expert. In fact, you're an expert if you're experiencing contaminated water or contaminated air or any of the contamination that comes out of Solvay. So speaking your mind and telling Solvay and New Jersey DEP, who will be at those meetings, what you think is extremely important and has just as much weight as what a technical expert would say. That will be a very important way in the coming months. And we don't know exactly what the schedule is going to be, but if you connect and right now, everybody who's registered, for instance, for this webinar, we can keep all of you up to date through email updates. And we will definitely let you know as soon as these public hearings are scheduled. And then there'll also be an opportunity for putting written comments in, and we will have action alerts and share information with folks about, you know, what various things are in this technical work plan that they'll be issuing. So this is something, it will happen not only in West Deptford, you know, it includes all of the communities around. Remember, Paulsboro was where this was discovered because their water, even though it's a couple miles away, their water is directly affected through the groundwater pollution plume that's leaving West Deptford and so the Solvay facility and other towns around as well. As I said earlier, 5 municipalities had to shut down their water wells back in 2013. And as they do more sampling, they find polluted water other places. So anybody can participate in this, even people from other parts of New Jersey, because of what we talked about earlier, air being a transport media for particularly the replacement compound, but also PFAS. So that's just one thing. And if you remain engaged when we send emails, we'll let you know because we could be having in-person forums. One of the things that we've talked about is having a meeting at the library. We've been hampered from having those kinds of meetings in a public place like a library because of COVID-19. But, you know, we're all hoping that it really will come true, that we're going to reach, you know, enough of a level of vaccination that everything will be open in the coming weeks. And we hope to have an in-person information meeting that just we hold for people who want to come and learn. We'll be showing this webinar, you know, we'll edit this webinar and we'll be showing that that night. Or daytime, we might have it more than once. So we're looking for opportunities to share information in order to raise awareness so more people know about this. We're very concerned that not that many people know about this, particularly the replacement. particularly if you're new to the area and didn't live through the expose and the crisis that occurred in 2013, 2014. Okay, so do home water filters? Yes, home water filters definitely help. Now it is required, and as Marilyn said, in West Deptford they have treatment on. They also, may purchase water that's surface water through a water system that is PFAA free or goes through a treatment system before it gets to them. But it is below the required maximum contaminant level for PFAS, and that is required that they do that. However, I mean, Jim mentioned that he's concerned his town does not seem to have that system, or his water supplier doesn't seem to have that system in place. And particularly if you are concerned because you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding or you're of childbearing age and you may want to become pregnant, so you're very concerned about the extremely vulnerable fetus and infant who is more affected by PFAS compounds than an adult is, because they drink more water per body weight, and because there's developmental impacts as a result of PFAS and PFNA included in that, then you might want to put a home water filter on top of your filtered tap water. And there's a lot of research on that. We can send more links out about it, but there is a very good treatment analysis. There's actually 3 of them that were done by the Drinking Water Quality Institute. And the scientists at the New Jersey Department of Health, who have also done excellent work on this issue, also have advice. So you can go on and look at the treatment reports that are on the Drinking Water Quality Institute. We'll also, like I said, be sending out more specific links. We couldn't fit them on all of them onto the slide, but reverse osmosis plus granular activated carbon is the recommended treatment that the consultants that Delaware Riverkeeper Network engaged from Cambridge environmental consultants who did our comment for us that we submitted to New Jersey DEP. That's what they recommend, and that's based on a lot of scientific research. So the next question, anybody have anything else to add from our panelists?
I just wanted to say that in 2 days, the day after tomorrow, I'm having a combined, I'm having a reverse osmosis under the sink filter put in. It's a 7-stage one, and it was recommended by the Environmental Working Group. And it wasn't cheap, and it's not going to be cheap to put in. So, I mean, I would love to have Solvay pay me for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. And yes, we will also send the link out to the Environmental Working Group site. They have really good information on there about consumer products too. And what
Marilyn, does it have to be installed by a plumber?
Well, no, people who have done it themselves. Personally, I don't think I'm able to do it. So I've hired a plumber to do it. So we'll see how they do.
Okay, so the next question, because we only have a couple minutes left, do employees working at the Solvay plant drink tap water? I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. We can ask that question of Solvay. I don't know if we'll get an answer. They do have a filtration system on their wastewater system at Solvay. They're required to do that because of the cleanup, and it goes through granulated activated carbon to remove the PFAS compounds. They are required to do that, but and I would imagine that, I mean, they're not exempt. Just because it's Solvay, it doesn't mean they're exempt from the standards that were imposed through the rulemaking that New Jersey DEP adopted. So the maximum contaminant level also applies there. So they have to meet the standards. They can't give polluted water to their workers, but whether or not they drink the water, they bottle water, I don't know. Okay, so we're kind of running out of time here, and I don't want to go too far over 8 o'clock in order to honor everybody's time this evening. But just quickly, I can see there was a question about the water department in West Deptford, that there's going to be a new treatment plant that's about to open. We don't know if it's opened or not, but it's a question that maybe Marilyn can research, and we'll try to send the answer out to you in the follow-up email that goes out. Do we know the effect of development of the docks? Yeah, there's of course, there's several different dock projects going on. One of them is, right there at West Deptford. And then there's also the one in Gibbstown. I know that PFAS compounds have been identified in some of the cleanup plans. We believe that there needs to be a tremendous amount more information and research done into that. We don't think New Jersey is doing a good enough analysis through the permit system that DEP gives for the dredging and construction of the Gibbstown facility, for instance. So we are concerned about that. And the Delaware Bay threatened and endangered species. Yes, there have been some samplings done. I'm glad you asked that question, Teresa, because one of the links we'll send in the follow-up, and it's not on the slide, is to the Delaware River Basin Commission study that has been done. They did fish flesh analysis. Whether or not they did sturgeon, I don't know. I don't think they sacrifice endangered species for that, but they might have found a dead species. But they do have regular species analyses of fish flesh, and they did find PFAS in it. And then when New Jersey DEP did their analysis for the fish advisory, they also found it in the fish they tested. So we do know that it is in fish flesh. We also know that it has built up in other marine life, and there's studies on that, such as dolphins in the Delaware Bay have PFAS in them, turtles, and mussels. So we know that there are problems. As far as birds are concerned, I don't know if there's been studies on that. We can ask, as well as the horseshoe crab eggs. So your carbon water filters made by DuPont. You know, it's funny, Jean, because one of the things, the ironies of all of this is that even when you go to take a sample of the water, you have to be extremely careful because DuPont makes the coatings that coat the inside of the water sample receptacles. So you have to go to a special place and get a water receptacle for your laboratory that does not have the DuPont coating. And in the early days when we did our door-to-door sampling in 2005 and 2006 down in Deepwater, it was a bear to find those sample containers, but we did it. We did it actually through the help of Canada. They came to our rescue. We had to go to a lab up there to find a lab that was not even connected. We could not find a lab in all of the United States that wasn't in some way connected to DuPont. So yes, there's tentacles everywhere whenever you reach into these chemicals. And I think Jim also made a good point of that in the ways that he's run into these Solvay products. Okay, so transdermal, I just want to say there are hundreds and hundreds of studies that have been done, and so far they have not found absorption through the skin is an exposure route for PFAS compounds. Now you can breathe it in, so the danger is that when you're taking a shower, through the aerosol of the shower, you can breathe it in, but it's mainly oral and inhalation. And even through the products that people wear, you can, but it's through inhalation. It's not because it's absorbed through the skin. At least that's what the science shows now. So I think we've gotten through most of the questions. I'm sorry if we missed any, but we don't, like I said, don't want to take advantage of people. And you know, it's a beautiful evening. It's not quite dark yet, so maybe folks can enjoy a little bit of it still. Thank you all for joining tonight. And again, we will be sending out a link to this recording. We will try to answer any questions that we didn't give a full answer to. And please stay connected because we really need people to step up. And just like that photograph in the slideshow where you saw the people of Paulsboro and from the region come out and say, we need answers. You don't have to have the answers yourself, but you got to tell them that we need the answers and they have to answer it. And Solvay is behind the 8 ball here. And we need to make sure that they know the public knows. And so that means spreading awareness. So stay connected with us, come out when the time comes. I hope you'll come to our in-person forum as soon as we can have one. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And I would like to thank Marilyn, James, and Gina. Thank you very much for being our panelists tonight, because speaking up as members of the public is the most important thing that you can do. So thank you all.
I'd like to thank
Yes, go right ahead.
Tracy for her dedication. She is involved in so many environmental issues. It was just hard to count. And I hope that everybody can go to the website, DelawareRiverkeeper.org. See what they're doing. There are so many things that you can get involved in about saving the Delaware River Basin from pollution. And you'd be amazed. And I want to thank Tracy for holding this webinar.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.